The desert lay still, like a hunter ready to pounce, its golden red talons spread across the barren badlands, where nothing delicate could thrive. Ruthless heat danced above parched ground that had long forgotten the touch of rain, while vultures soared above, as if anticipating the fate that awaited Seraphine Renardson. Isolated and pregnant with twins, she had been left to perish in this harsh wilderness. Her only transgression was carrying boys in her womb, when her in-laws had insisted she bear a child with a different lineage. The wagon had been left behind under a stunted juniper tree. Its single wheel was broken beyond fixing. The canvas top drooped lifelessly in the still afternoon, providing scant shelter from the fierce sun. Seraphine's skin, once fair and dotted with freckles that her husband Gareth had once lovingly traced, was now scorched and blistered. Her lips were chapped and bleeding from dehydration. Her blue calico gown, soaked with sweat, clung to her heavily pregnant belly. "Just a little longer," she murmured, though no one was there to listen. The labor pains had begun at dawn, mild at first, reminiscent of the distant rumble of buffalo herds she had heard when they first crossed the Missouri. But as the day wore on, the agony intensified, becoming more urgent. Seraphine had assisted with the birth of calves and foals back on her father's farm in Pennsylvania, but nothing had readied her for this. The way her body seemed to collapse inward, the unyielding pressure, the terror that loomed larger than the heat itself. Her hands, once smooth from managing the household, were now rough and chafed. She had spent 3 days attempting to fix the wagon wheel, using only the few tools that had been left behind when they deserted her. Each night she had kept a small fire burning, hoping that someone might see the smoke, that rescue would come. But only the coyotes had responded. Their haunting howls echoed her despair. Seraphine had been just 19 when she married Gareth Renardson, the third son of a cattle magnate whose ranch dominated the Wyoming territory like an empire. She had believed herself fortunate. Gareth, with his kind eyes and warm smile, had promised her a life of excitement in the West. How naive she had been. The first year had been tough, but happy. They lived in a modest cabin on the outskirts of the Renardson ranch, Gareth toiling from sunrise to sunset to earn his father's approval. Seraphine had become skilled at making the most of little, at stretching meals and mending clothes until they were more patchwork than original fabric. When she revealed her pregnancy, Gareth had lifted her into his arms, his joy as palpable as the heat from a furnace. That happiness had soured when his father, Aurelian Renardson, had expressed his demands. He made it plain that the Renardson name required robust sons, not daughters who were of no use. The elder man had already lost his firstborn to pneumonia, and his second to a cavalry assault during the war. Gareth was his final chance to uphold the legacy he had forged through sheer will and unyielding resolve. "Should she bear you a daughter," he had declared during one evening meal, his gaze as cold and unyielding as pebbles in a stream, "send her back east where she belongs." Seraphine had felt the weight of his disapproval bearing down on her, as if her body's decisions were a measure of her value. Gareth had stood up for her that night, his voice raised against his father's for the first time since she had known him. But seeds of uncertainty had been sown. He began to observe her with a hint of doubt in his eyes, a question left unvoiced. Would she let him down as well? The incident occurred 2 months prior. A startled horse, a fall that went unwitnessed. By the time they discovered Gareth's broken body at the base of the ravine, it was too late for anything but prayers. Seraphine had cried until she thought her heart would cease, But Aurelian Renarson had stood at his son's grave with dry eyes, his mouth a thin line of bitter resignation. "You will remain until the child is born," he had informed Seraphine afterward, his voice lacking any warmth. "If it is a boy, he will stay here to be raised as a Reynardson should be. If it is a girl—" He had not needed to complete the thought. The scorn in his eyes had made his intentions clear. Seraphine had tried to make herself indispensable, despite her expanding belly. She cooked for the ranch hands, mended clothes, and cleaned. But Aurelian's disdain for her grew as her belly swelled larger than anticipated. "Twins," the midwife had declared after examining her, a touch of concern in her weathered face. That very night, Seraphine had overheard the conversation that would alter everything. "Twins are a curse," Aurelian had told his foreman. "They divide the inheritance and bring nothing but strife. And if they are girls," he had spat into the fire, "be rid of her. Take her far enough that she cannot find her way back. The desert will handle the rest." Fear had driven Seraphine to the small box where Gareth had kept their savings, just enough for a stagecoach ticket east. But when she attempted to depart the next morning, Aurelian's men were already there. The money vanished from her trunk. The ranch became her prison. 2 days later, the foreman and another hand had come for her before dawn. "It is time for a journey, Mrs. Reynardson," he had said, his face carefully expressionless. They had loaded her into a wagon with a few supplies, not enough, she realized later, to sustain anyone for long. They had traveled for 2 days, far beyond any familiar landmark, until the wheel had broken in this barren expanse of nothingness. Reynardson's foreman conveyed his apologies as they rode away, abandoning her with the damaged wagon. But the Reynardsons had no use for twins, especially if they were girls. As another contraction surged through her, Seraphine stifled a scream. The sun was dipping low, casting the Badlands in a bloody red glow that would soon yield to the frigid desert night. She had endured 3 nights alone. But she couldn't face this birth without assistance. She thought of her mother, far away in Pennsylvania. She had written about her marriage, her journey west, and the impending child. Had those letters ever reached her? Would anyone know where to search for her remains? The pain peaked, erasing all other thoughts. She clung to the wagon seat, breathing in short, sharp gasps. When the pain subsided, she forced herself to gather her strength, collecting clean cloths from her trunk, the last of her water, and a knife she had hidden in her boot. She arranged them beside a makeshift bed of blankets in the wagon shade. The next contraction dropped her to her knees. She felt something shift, an insistent pressure she couldn't ignore. Seraphine positioned herself as best she could, recalling the midwife's instructions from what felt like another lifetime. "God," she prayed, her voice hoarse in the silence, "if I perish here, save my children. Send someone, anyone," she pleaded. But the desert offered no response, only the distant call of a hawk. The sun sank lower, shadows stretching across the parched earth. In the distance, heat waves shimmered on the horizon, flickering like specters. Time lost all significance as Seraphine's world narrowed to breath, pain, push, and rest. The first child arrived as the sun dipped below the horizon, his cry robust despite his harsh entrance into the world. Seraphine cleaned him with shaky hands, wrapped him in a cloth torn from her undergarments, and placed him in the wagon shade. Hearthglen, she named him, after her father who had taught her resilience. The second boy's arrival was more challenging, his passage sending waves of agony through her already weakened body. By the time he emerged, the first stars were appearing in the deepening sky. His cry was fainter, his tiny form more fragile than his brother's. "Corvus," she whispered, holding him close. Her husband's middle name, a fragile link to the father they would never know. Seraphine lay back, the twins nestled against her chest, too drained to move further. Blood pooled beneath her, more than it should have. She knew what that meant. She had witnessed it once when a neighbor's wife had died in a childbirth. The desert would claim her after all, but perhaps the boys would survive. Her gaze drifted to the horizon, where darkness was swiftly engulfing the last remnants of daylight. And there it was, another mirage, another deception of her fading vision. A shadowy figure emerged, riding towards her on horseback, outlined by the setting sun. Seraphine pulled her sons tightly to her, adrenaline surging through her veins as fear coursed through her. She wondered if Aurelian's men had come back to finish her off, or if this stranger posed an even greater threat, seeing a lone woman as an easy target. The rider came closer, his horse navigating the rough terrain with caution. In the dimming light, Seraphine could see a man sitting tall, his hair in 2 long braids, decorated with beads that glinted in the fading sunlight. He wore a fringed buckskin shirt and had a rifle slung across his saddle, though he made no move to reach for it as he approached. Seraphine recognized him as a Sioux warrior, recalling tales that offered little comfort to a white woman stranded in the wilderness. She attempted to push herself up to appear less defenseless, but her body failed her. Darkness crept into the edges of her vision, threatening to consume her. The twins started to wail, their cries weak but persistent, reaching out to a world that had already tried to cast them aside. The warrior dismounted at a respectful distance, his actions deliberate and unhurried. He spoke words she couldn't comprehend, his voice steady and calm. When she didn't reply, he switched to broken English. "You hurt?" he stated, rather than asked. Seraphine's laugh was sharp, tinged with hysteria. "Yes," she admitted. "I'm hurt." He came closer, hands visible and empty of weapons. His face came into clearer view, younger than she had initially thought, with eyes that held neither malice nor sympathy, only a careful evaluation. "Babies," he said, gesturing towards the twins. "New?" "Yes." Seraphine held them tighter. "My sons," she said. He knelt a few feet away, maintaining a respectful distance. "I am Silvershade," he said, pointing to his chest. "Who abandons women with newborns in such a place?" he asked, his tone holding no judgment, only practical curiosity. "My husband's family," Seraphine replied, the words tasting bitter. "They didn't want them," she struggled to finish, tears streaking her dusty cheeks. Silvershade nodded as if this explained everything. "White men do this," he said simply. "They discard what they deem worthless." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her condition, the sparse supplies, the wrecked wagon. Then he stood and walked to his horse, returning with a water skin. He offered it to her without a word. Seraphine hesitated only briefly before taking it. The water was cool and refreshing on her dry lips. She wanted to drink it all at once, but forced herself to sip slowly, knowing too much would make her ill. "Thank you," she said, offering the skin back. Silvershade shook his head. "Keep it," he said. Then, after a pause, "Night falls soon. It will be cold. You cannot stay here." Fear gripped her heart. "I can't travel after the birth," she said. "I know," he replied, glancing at the blood-soaked ground. "You're losing too much blood. But this isn't a safe place to stay." He motioned towards the expansive desert around them. "Coyotes will come," he warned. "Perhaps the men who abandoned you will return. Seraphine acknowledged the truth in his words. The temperature was already plummeting, the desert rapidly releasing its heat to the night sky. The twins would not endure the cold, and she was too frail to keep a fire burning throughout the night. "What other option do I have?" she asked, her voice laden with resignation. Drakenvale pondered her question thoughtfully. "I will take you to my people," he declared after a moment. "There is a medicine woman among them who can aid your sons." Seraphine's fear resurfaced. "They won't want me," she whispered. "Some of them might not." He nodded, his honesty disarming. "But the medicine woman, she takes in those whom others cast aside. She will help." Seraphine's voice was barely a whisper as she asked, "But why would you help me?" He was silent for a moment, his gaze shifting from her face to the twin boys and back. "Many moons ago, white soldiers took my wife's life," he revealed. "She carried our unborn child." His expression remained impassive, but a flicker of old pain crossed his eyes. No one came to her aid. I couldn't reach her in time. He stood taller, his decision made. "I will not leave another to perish when I can offer assistance. It is not our way." Seraphine felt tears welling up, this time from a gratitude so deep it left her speechless. She had been ready to meet her end in this desolate place, hoping only that someone might find her sons before it was too late. Now this man, this stranger whose people had every reason to despise hers, was offering her a chance at survival. "How can we possibly make it?" she asked, looking at her weakened state, the newborn twins, and the vast distance that surely lay between them and safety. Drakenvale moved with practiced efficiency, gathering her blankets and the few supplies worth salvaging from the wagon. He fashioned a carrier from his own blanket, a cleverly designed sling that would securely hold both infants against his chest. "You will ride," he instructed, gesturing to his horse. "The babies will be here." He patted the sling. But Seraphine began to object. "You are too weak to carry them," he stated matter-of-factly. "If you fall, they will die. This is the better way." There was no refuting his logic. With his assistance, Seraphine managed to stand, her vision swimming from the effort. The world spun dangerously, and she would have collapsed if Drakenvale's firm hand hadn't steadied her. "Blood loss makes you dizzy," he observed. "We must go slowly." Getting her onto the horse was a painful process that left Seraphine breathless and on the verge of fainting. The twins were transferred to the sling, where they nestled against Drakenvale's chest, surprisingly calm in their new position. As they prepared to depart, Seraphine glanced back at the wagon, the last remnant of her life with Gareth. There was nothing worth saving, nothing worth remembering except the taste of betrayal. "My husband was not like his father," she said abruptly, feeling a sudden need for this stranger to understand. "He would never have done this." Silvershade hesitated, perhaps choosing his words carefully, before finally speaking. "He abandoned you among wolves," he remarked, then started walking, guiding the horse at a measured pace across the desert as darkness fell. Seraphine gripped the saddle, struggling to maintain consciousness as they journeyed on. She observed Drakenvale's back, steadfast and resilient despite the load he bore. Every so often he would softly speak to the twins in his native language, gentle words that appeared to calm them. When they grew fidgety, they walked for what felt like endless hours, the moon ascending to illuminate their path through the Badlands. Seraphine drifted in and out of lucidity, her thoughts scattered by agony and fatigue. At one point she believed she heard singing, a deep, rhythmic melody that seemed to harmonize with the night sounds. "What is that melody?" she inquired, her voice faint in the vast emptiness. Drakenvale glanced back at her. "A prayer for a safe journey," he responded. "For you, for the little ones." Seraphine felt tears well up in her eyes once more. "Thank you," she murmured, though she wasn't certain if he heard her. The landscape began to shift gradually. The desolate desert gave way to sparse vegetation, tough brush, resilient grasses, and the occasional group of trees indicating the presence of water. Seraphine's mind barely registered the change, but a glimmer of hope ignited within her, like a distant flame. They reached the top of a gentle slope, and below them, nestled in a sheltered valley, Seraphine spotted the glow of fires. Teepees stood in a rough circle, their conical forms sturdy and comforting against the night sky. Dogs barked in the distance, signaling their arrival. "My people," Drakenvale announced, pausing to allow her to take in the sight. "My mother's lodge is there," he pointed out, indicating a teepee slightly separated from the others, adorned with symbols Seraphine didn't recognize. As they neared the encampment, figures emerged from the teepees, alerted by the dogs. Seraphine felt the weight of unseen gazes, the murmur of voices speaking in a language she couldn't comprehend. Fear gripped her once more. What if they rejected her? What if they saw only an adversary in her fair skin and blue eyes? But Drakenvale pressed onward, his stride unhurried, his demeanor dignified. He called out in his native tongue, a brief explanation that caused the onlookers to step back, clearing a path for their passage. Before the medicine woman's lodge, Drakenvale finally halted. He spoke softly to someone just inside the entrance, and moments later an elderly woman stepped out. Her face was deeply lined, her hair as white as snow, but she moved with the agility of someone much younger. She surveyed the scene with keen, perceptive eyes, taking in Drakenvale with the twins in their sling, and Seraphine perched atop the horse. "Bring her inside," the old woman instructed in flawless English, startling Seraphine. "Hurry now!" Hands reached up to assist Seraphine in dismounting, and the world spun perilously as her feet touched the ground. The final image that lingered in her mind before she lost consciousness was Drakenvale, tenderly unwrapping the twins from their sling, his massive hands astonishingly gentle against their delicate bodies. "They're exquisite," the elderly woman, a pony, remarked, marveling at the powerful spirits housed in such tiny frames. Then darkness enveloped her, and Seraphine recalled nothing more. Seraphine stirred to the sound of unfamiliar noises, the gentle crackling of a small fire, the distant giggles of children, and the steady grinding of something in a mortar. For a moment, confusion overwhelmed her. This was neither the Renardson Ranch nor her family's home in Pennsylvania. Definitely not the wrecked wagon in the Badlands. The air carried a scent of smoke, herbs, and an earthy aroma she couldn't place. She rested on a bed of soft furs, a woven blanket adorned with intricate geometric patterns covering her. The walls surrounding her were made of hide, stretched over wooden poles that converged at a central point high above, where daylight filtered through an opening with a smoke flap, a teepee. Her memories came rushing back like a torrent. The birth, the blood, the twins. "My babies," she gasped, attempting to sit up. A sharp pain in her abdomen forced her back down with a groan. "Lie still," a voice nearby instructed. "Your sons are safe." The elderly woman Seraphine remembered from the previous night entered her view. A pony, the medicine woman. Up close, her face was a tapestry of deep lines, each one a testament to time and experience. Her dark eyes, however, were bright and piercing, missing nothing. "You were on the brink of death," the pony stated calmly, kneeling beside Seraphine with a small clay cup. "Drink this." It will alleviate the pain and halt further bleeding. The liquid was bitter, with an aftertaste reminiscent of willow bark. Seraphine winced but drank it all, too desperate for relief to hesitate. "My sons," she repeated, her voice more steady now. The pony stepped aside, revealing a small cradle board near the fire. Seraphine could see 2 tiny bundles swaddled tightly in soft rabbit fur. "They are resilient, like their mother," the pony said. Seraphine felt tears well up in her eyes. "You saved us," she whispered. "Silvershade brought you to me. I simply applied the knowledge the spirits have granted me," the pony replied, settling beside the fire and adding herbs to a pot of simmering water. "You were fortunate. Another hour and you would have bled out, leaving these little ones alone in a harsh world." "Where is he?" Seraphine asked, suddenly noticing Silvershade's absence. "He is conferring with the council. Not everyone is pleased that he brought a white woman to our camp," the pony explained, her hands continuing their work, deft despite her age. "These are trying times for our people. The white man's government offers promises with one hand and takes with the other. Some fear you might bring soldiers to our door." Fear gripped Seraphine's heart. "I won't. I have nowhere else to go. My husband's family abandoned me to die," she said. The pony nodded, unfazed. "Drakenvale mentioned as much. It's not the first such tale I've heard," she said. The pony's eyes carefully assessed Seraphine. "What plans do you have for after your recovery?" The inquiry took Seraphine by surprise. She had been so consumed by the urgent need to survive that she hadn't considered what lay ahead. Where could she turn? She had no funds, no relatives within 1,000 miles. Returning to the Reynardson ranch was out of the question. Even if she could reach a town, what then? A widow with twin newborns would find scant welcome or prospects. "I'm not sure," Seraphine confessed after a moment. A pony seemed to accept this. "For now, rest and regain your strength. Tomorrow will bring its own concerns." A soft cry came from one of the swaddled infants. A pony went to the cradle board, lifting the child with practiced skill. "This one, the second-born, is hungry," she said, bringing the baby to Seraphine, who struggled to position herself to nurse. A pony assisted, arranging pillows and guiding her on how to hold the infant. "You've never done this before," a pony observed. Seraphine shook her head. "I helped with calving and foaling on my father's farm. But this," she looked down at her son's tiny, wrinkled face, "this is different. All new life requires nurturing." A pony's voice softened. "The buffalo cow does not question how to care for her calf. Neither should you doubt your body's instincts." As if to illustrate her point, Corvus latched on successfully, his tiny hands kneading reflexively. Seraphine felt a surge of emotion so intense it stole her breath, a mix of love and fear, a responsibility heavier than any she had ever known. "What names have you given them?" a pony asked. "Corvus and Hearthglen," Seraphine replied. A pony made a soft sound, neither approving nor disapproving. "They will need names with power to protect them in this land, names that speak to their spirits. But for now, they are simply the sons of a courageous mother." The teepee flap opened, letting in a beam of bright sunlight. A young woman entered, her arms laden with dried meat and berries. She paused, taken aback by the sight of Seraphine awake and nursing, her expression a blend of curiosity and fatigue. A pony spoke to her in Lakota, gesturing toward Seraphine. The young woman nodded, carefully placing her burden near the fire before approaching. "This is Carrion, my granddaughter," a pony explained. "She will assist in caring for you and the little ones." Kyrian appeared to be in her late teens, possessing a quiet dignity that reminded Seraphine of Drakenvale. She wore a deerskin dress adorned with intricate beadwork and kept her eyes respectfully lowered as a pony introduced her. "Thank you," Seraphine said directly to her, "for your assistance." The girl looked up, surprised to be addressed, then offered a tentative smile before speaking in halting English. "I help with babies." Corvus had fallen asleep at Seraphine's breast. A pony guided her to switch her attention to Hearthglen, who was nursing with even more intensity than his brother. Beyond the teepee, the camp's usual sounds persisted. Dogs barked, children played, and women called out to each other, carrying on with their daily lives just outside the teepee walls. Meanwhile, Seraphine was inside, grappling with her new circumstances. "How long have I been here?" she inquired. "2 nights and a day," a pony responded. "The fever has come and gone. That's a good sign. It indicates your body is fighting back." Seraphine attempted to grasp this information. It had been 2 days since her world had shattered and been rebuilt into something unfamiliar. 2 days since strangers had shown her more compassion than her husband's family ever had. As the afternoon progressed, Seraphine drifted in and out of consciousness. The medicine in her body's weariness pulled her under, despite her efforts to stay awake. Each time she stirred, either a pony or Kyrian was present, tending to the fire, checking on the twins, or bringing water. The routine of their actions was strangely reassuring. It was close to dusk when the teepee flap opened again, and Drakenvale entered. He appeared weary, with deeper lines around his mouth than Seraphine recalled, but he carried himself with the same quiet dignity. He exchanged a few words with a pony, his voice low, before turning his focus to Seraphine. "You are awake," he stated. "That's fortunate," Seraphine replied. "You saved us." He waved his hand dismissively. "I merely found you." A pony handled the rest. "The council?" a pony asked him in English for Seraphine's benefit. Drakenvale's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "They will permit you to stay until you are strong enough to travel. After that," he trailed off, leaving the council's decision unspoken. Seraphine felt a chill that had nothing to do with her physical state. "They want me to leave?" she asked. "Some do," he acknowledged. "Others recognize that you pose no threat, but these are not peaceful times between our peoples. More settlers arrive each day. Our hunting grounds continue to shrink. Every day there are new tales of broken promises. I am not one of them," he said, looking at her directly. "I have no one," Seraphine protested weakly. "I understand this, but fear does not always yield to reason." He glanced at the twins, his expression softening slightly. "For now, you are safe. We will address tomorrow when it arrives." A pony repeated his earlier words, and Seraphine wondered if this was a common phrase among these people. She tried to envision living in the moment, unburdened by fears of the future or regrets of the past. It seemed both freeing and frightening. "There is something else," Silvershade said after a pause. "Riders were spotted today near where I found you. White men searching the desert." Seraphine's blood turned to ice. "Reynardson men," she whispered, clutching Hearthglen closer. "Perhaps 3 riders, well armed," Silvershade continued. "They found the wagon. Looking to ensure I'm dead," Seraphine murmured. "Or looking to complete what they started," Drakenvale said bluntly. "If their pursuers discover tracks leading to this place, they won't dare approach under the cover of darkness." A pony interjected, explaining that tomorrow Running Elk and the others would ensure that any trace of their passage vanished. Drakenvale gave a nod, seemingly content with this strategy. "Rest now, Seraphine," he advised. "Regain your strength. You will need it." After he departed, Seraphine struggled to regain the tranquility she had felt earlier. The thought that Aurelian's men might be hunting for her filled her with anxiety, not just for herself and the twins, but also for those who had rescued them. "Why would they come searching for me?" she asked a pony who was brewing tea over the fire. "They left me to perish. Why not simply let the desert take its course?" The pony looked at her thoughtfully. "Perhaps they fear you might survive. Perhaps they are concerned about what you know." She handed Seraphine a cup of the aromatic tea. "Or perhaps they have reservations about the children." Men like these, who rule through wealth and intimidation, dislike unaddressed complications. Seraphine reflected on Aurelian Renardson, recalling the cold calculation in his eyes when he spoke of his legacy, his fixation on having an heir to carry on his name and inherit his vast estates. She had assumed he didn't want twins because they would split the inheritance or because he feared they might be girls. But what if she had misinterpreted his motives? "The boys," she said slowly, as realization began to dawn. "He might want the boys." The pony nodded, understanding her immediately. "The bloodline." "Yes, such men place an irrational importance on these matters." "But he sent me away," Seraphine protested. "He wanted me gone." "You," the pony emphasized. "Not necessarily them. Perhaps he intended to claim them later, to raise them as his own without the inconvenience of their mother." The notion was so horrifying that Seraphine could barely grasp it, yet it held a chilling logic. Aurelian had lost his eldest sons. Gareth had been his last hope for continuing the Reynardson dynasty. The twins, Gareth's sons, would be invaluable to him, especially if he could control their upbringing and mold them into the heirs he had always desired. "I won't let him take them," Seraphine vowed, her voice low and determined. "I will fight to my last breath." "That," the pony said grimly, "is precisely what he is banking on." That night, Seraphine tossed and turned, waking at every noise, imagining riders approaching in the darkness. The twins, however, seemed untroubled by her fears, sleeping soundly in their cradle board, stirring only to feed before drifting off again. In the dim light before dawn, Kyrian arrived to assist with their care, her gentle hands changing their wrappings and bathing the infants with practiced ease. Outside, the camp was stirring earlier than usual. Seraphine could hear men's voices and the sounds of horses being prepared. She caught snippets of Kyrian's translation as the girl listened to the activity. "They are creating false trails," she explained hesitantly, "to lead the enemy astray." Seraphine nodded, acknowledging her understanding. "Thank you," she said, not for the first time. Kyrian offered her that familiar, bashful grin. "Rest now. I'll keep watch over the babies." Despite her worries, sleep claimed Seraphine once more. When she opened her eyes again, the teepee was bathed in the warm glow of the afternoon sun. A young woman, unfamiliar to Seraphine, was tending the fire. She glanced up as Seraphine moved, her face reflecting open curiosity. "Kimler is assisting with the laundry," she said, her English surprisingly fluent. "I am Wee-Wee. I'm Seraphine," she replied, attempting to sit up. Her body felt a touch stronger today, the pain in her abdomen more bearable. "I know who you are," Wee-Wee stated. "Everyone does." "You're the white woman from Drakenvale, brought in from the desert." Her voice held neither hostility nor warmth, merely a straightforward acknowledgement. Seraphine was unsure how to respond to this. "Are the children all right?" she asked, gesturing towards the cradleboard. They sleep, Wee Wee replied. A pony says they are robust, like young eagles. Seraphine felt a rush of maternal pride, swiftly followed by worry. Have the men returned? The ones who went to create false trails? She asked. Yes, Wee Wee confirmed. They rode in circles, leaving signs pointing south, away from our camp. If the white men follow, they'll find themselves near Apache lands. Wee Wee's lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. They won't go there if they're wise. This should have been comforting, but Seraphine couldn't shake her sense of unease. What if they don't follow the false trail? What if they keep searching? She asked. Wee Wee shrugged. Then our warriors will handle them, she said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. The twins began to stir, making soft, hungry sounds. Wee Wee assisted Seraphine in positioning them for nursing, showing no discomfort with the intimate task. As they fed, she studied them with open curiosity. They don't look alike, she observed. Seraphine looked down at her sons. It was true. Though both had the delicate features of newborns, Hearthglen was slightly larger, with a dark tuft of hair that hinted at his father's raven-black locks. Corvus was smaller, more delicate, with hair so fine and light it was nearly invisible. Twins often don't, Seraphine explained, even though they're born together. Wee Wee nodded thoughtfully. We had twins in our band once, boys. One lived, one died before the naming ceremony. She made a small warding gesture, perhaps to ward off bad luck. It's rare among our people. Is it considered unlucky? Seraphine asked hesitantly. Some think so, Wee Wee admitted. But a pony says twins possess special medicine. 1 foot in this world, 1 in the spirit world. They see things others cannot. The idea was both strange and oddly comforting. Seraphine looked at her sons with new eyes, wondering what futures awaited them in this harsh, beautiful land. A pony says you have nowhere to go, Wee Wee continued. That your husband's people abandoned you. Seraphine saw no reason to conceal what the entire camp probably already suspected. The white men were searching for me and for the children. I believe Seraphine gently corrected my father-in-law. He desires an heir, and he might have concluded that the twins could fulfill his wishes without my interference. Stormtide's expression grew stern. Men who view children as possessions, she declared with unexpected passion. They are the same in every tribe. Her tone hinted at personal history, but Seraphine knew better than to probe further. Instead, she shifted the conversation. How did you come to speak English so fluently? A shadow passed over Wee Wee's face. The missionary school, she replied, after 3 winters there. She touched a small cross that hung around her neck, partially concealed by her dress. They taught us reading, writing, their God's words, and how to be ashamed of our own ways. You managed to escape, Seraphine inferred. My father traded many horses to bring me back, Brightweave clarified. He saw what the school was doing, not teaching, but erasing. Her fingers closed around the cross. Some things are worth keeping, others I try to forget. Our discussion was interrupted by the return of an elderly woman on a pony. She carried bundles of fresh herbs and what appeared to be strips of dried meat. She spoke to Brightweave in Lakota, and the young woman nodded, making room by the fire. The men who had gone to create false trails had spotted something else. A pony informed Seraphine as she arranged her bundles. More riders are approaching from the east. Soldiers. Seraphine's breath hitched. Are they searching for me as well? No, a pony replied, her expression grave. They are searching for us, There is a new treaty, new borders for our hunting grounds. They come to inform us that we must relocate again. But this is your home, Seraphine protested. A pony gave her a look that held centuries of endurance against injustice. Home is where the people are, she stated simply. The land remembers us, even when we cannot remain, she continued, grinding herbs with practiced ease, the pestles striking the mortar in a steady rhythm. The council is convening now to decide our course of action. Some advocate for resistance, others suggest moving before the soldiers arrive. A swift consensus is unlikely. And what of me and the children? Seraphine asked, suddenly fearful that in the face of this greater threat, our presence might become an unbearable burden. That is also under discussion, a pony acknowledged. But Drakenvale speaks for you. He holds influence among the warriors. They heed his words. Outside, the camp's activities had taken on a more urgent tone. Women could be heard packing their belongings, men checking their weapons. The morning's peace had dissipated like dew under the intense sun. If the soldiers arrive, Seraphine said slowly, and find me here? Yes, a pony confirmed her unspoken thought. It would be disastrous for everyone. The gravity of this realization weighed on Seraphine like a heavy stone. I had brought peril to these people, who had saved my life, and continued to shield me despite the danger. Their generosity might come at a great cost. She insisted that I must depart, yet the idea of venturing back into the wilderness with newborns struck her with dread. As soon as I am able, I replied, meeting her gaze. And where am I to go? Back to the people who abandoned me? To a town where a woman alone with 2 infants would find only pity mixed with condemnation, or into the wilderness to confront the harsh elements once more? When presented in that light, every choice seemed insurmountable. Seraphine felt tears of exasperation welling up behind her eyes. I am uncertain, she confessed, but I cannot allow your people to endure hardship because of me. Our people have endured long before your arrival, a pony responded softly, her voice gentle despite the stark reality of her words. And they will continue to endure long after you have gone. This is not your burden to bear. The flap of the teepee swung open, revealing Drakenvale. He appeared even more weary than before, his face etched with the strain of whatever had transpired in the council. He spoke rapidly in Lakota to a pony, the words rushing too quickly for Seraphine to grasp more than a few familiar phrases. The pony listened, nodding occasionally, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. Once Drakenvale finished, she replied briefly, gesturing once towards Seraphine and the twins. Finally, Drakenvale turned to address Seraphine directly. The council has reached a decision, he announced. We will break camp tomorrow at dawn and venture deeper into the hills, where the soldiers will struggle to follow. Seraphine braced herself for the inevitable words that she and the twins would not be joining them, that they would be left behind or directed to the nearest settlement. Instead, Drakenvale continued, You will accompany us. She looked at him in astonishment. The council agreed to this? She asked. Not all of them, he admitted, but enough. You are still recovering. The infants are too young to travel alone. He paused, then added softly, and I gave my word that I would ensure your safety. Seraphine was at a loss for words. The depth of this pledge from a man who owed her nothing left her speechless. There is a condition, he continued. When we reach the summer hunting grounds, when you are stronger, you must choose your path, to stay or to leave. And if you choose to leave, You must never reveal where you have been or who you have seen." "I would never betray your trust," Seraphine vowed. The pony nodded, accepting her word without hesitation. "Rest tonight," she advised. "Tomorrow will be a challenging journey." After he left, Seraphine turned to a pony, still trying to comprehend what had just transpired. Why would he do this? Risk so much for strangers, she wondered aloud. The pony continued her work with the herbs, but her eyes were distant, seeing something beyond the walls of the tepee. "My grandson carries many wounds that are not visible," she said finally. "When the soldiers took his wife, they took a part of him as well. For many moons, he moved like a man already dead, going through the motions of living without truly being alive." She gazed straight at Seraphine, pondering whether you and these infants were sent by the spirits to mend him, just as he had rescued you. This notion struck Seraphine as vastly different from the beliefs she had been raised with. The thought that their encounter might have been fated, guided by powers beyond human comprehension, was both unfamiliar and intriguingly persuasive. What if I'm leading him, and all of you, into more suffering? She wondered aloud. The pony's weathered face relaxed into a gentle smile. "Child, life inevitably brings pain. To shun it is to shun life itself. The true question is not whether pain will come, but how we respond when it does." She looked pointedly at the twins. "These little ones might grow up straddling two worlds, belonging completely to neither. It's a challenging path, but it could also grant them profound insight and understanding." Outside, the sun began its descent, casting the sky in hues of orange and gold. Seraphine could hear the camp readying for the journey ahead, a journey she would now undertake, for better or for worse. "Tomorrow," a pony announced, standing to check on the twins, "we set out to face whatever awaits us. Tonight, we pray it's something better than what we're leaving behind." Dawn arrived with the sounds of a camp dismantling itself, the practiced efficiency of a people who had mastered the art of mobility. Seraphine sat outside a pony's tepee, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, observing as the Nerissa women rolled hides, packed cooking utensils, and secured belongings to the travois. She felt helpless, too weak to assist, yet keenly aware that her presence had hastened this hurried departure. The twins slept against her chest, swaddled together in a sling Kyrian had made, their tiny breaths steady in sleep. Hearthglen's dark hair had dried into wild tufts, while Corvus remained nearly bald, his skin more delicate than his brother's. Just a week old, and they had already endured more than many do in a lifetime. "You shouldn't be sitting on the ground," a pony admonished, stepping out of the partially dismantled tepee. "The bleeding might start again." Seraphine shifted uncomfortably. "I couldn't stay inside any longer, not with everyone working so hard." The pony made a dismissive sound. "Your work is to heal and keep those little ones alive." She handed Seraphine a strip of dried meat. "Eat. The journey will be long." Silvershade approached, leading 3 horses, and presented a modified travois smaller than the others, with a cradle-like structure built into it. "For you and the little ones," he explained, noticing Seraphine's puzzled look. "You can't ride properly yet?" The contraption looked unstable, but Seraphine was in no position to argue. Any means of transport was better than being left behind. "Thank you," she said, her words feeling insufficient for everything he had done. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "There is no debt between us," he interrupted, his expression softening slightly. "I was guided to you by a higher power. I obeyed that divine call. Before she could utter a word, a disturbance erupted from the camp's eastern boundary. A young warrior burst in, his horse heaving from the effort. He shouted in Lakota, his voice filled with urgency. Drakenvale's stance shifted abruptly, his body taut with tension. He issued commands to the nearby men, who swiftly reached for their weapons. "What's happening?" Seraphine inquired, holding the twins more tightly. "Soldiers," a woman replied grimly. "They're near. They must have ridden through the night." Fear surged within Seraphine. Was this because of me? No, Drakenvale reassured her, returning to her side. This was already unfolding before you arrived, but it alters our plans. He glanced at the half-packed camp. We must divide. Smaller groups travel faster and leave fewer traces. The elderly and mothers with young children will head north into the high hills, a woman explained. The warriors and hunters will veer east to lead the soldiers away. And me? Seraphine asked, though she already knew the answer. You will join us, a woman confirmed. With the women and children. Within moments, the camp transitioned from organized activity to controlled chaos. Tents were dismantled with astonishing speed, their components divided into manageable loads. Children who had been playing were quickly gathered, their games abandoned as they picked up on the adults' urgency. Drakenvale assisted Seraphine onto the travois, arranging blankets to cushion her still-healing body. The twins were secured in the cradle, swaddled so tightly they resembled tiny bundles. I will meet you at the sacred waters, Drakenvale told a woman, his hand briefly resting on her shoulder. 5 days, if all goes well, the elder nodded, accepting what was clearly a familiar parting. May your journey be clear and your aim true, grandson. He turned to Seraphine. Follow her lead. Do exactly as she says. His gaze lingered on the twins for a moment. Keep them quiet if you can. I will, Seraphine vowed. Be cautious. A faint smile touched his lips. Then he was gone, mounting his horse and riding toward a group of warriors gathering at the camp's edge. The women's group set out first, a procession of about 20 travelers, including elderly men, women with young children, and a few adolescent girls, such as Kyrian and Brightweave. They headed north, sticking to a rocky path that would leave minimal tracks. 4 young warriors rode with them, positioned at the front, rear, and sides of the group. Seraphine's travois swayed with the horse's movement, a rocking motion that would have been comforting under different circumstances. As it was, each jolt sent pain through her healing body, a constant reminder of her fragility. They journeyed in near silence, the only sounds being the creak of leather, the clop of hooves on stone, and the occasional whisper between travelers. Even the children seemed to grasp the need for quiet, their usual energy subdued by the surrounding tension. By midday, they had ascended sufficiently for Seraphine to glance back and observe the immense landscape they had traversed. The camp had vanished, obliterated as if it had never been there. Far off, a dust cloud drifted eastward. The warriors, Seraphine noted, were intentionally drawing attention. Look, Wee Wee whispered, riding up beside the travois. She gestured southeast. Soldiers, Seraphine said, shielding her eyes from the sun's brightness. Tiny figures on horseback marched in formation across the desert, their blue uniforms nearly indistinguishable from this distance. They were pursuing the warriors' trail, just as Drakenvale had planned. Will they be safe? Seraphine asked, recalling Drakenvale Watui's expression. It was inscrutable. They know these hills better than any soldier, Wee Wee replied. They'll lead them in circles until they're too exhausted and parched to go on. Her voice implied this was a tactic the Nerissa had employed before. They pressed northward, the landscape becoming more challenging as they climbed. Pine forest replaced the scrubland, the air cooler and scented with resin. Seraphine had never ventured this high in the mountains, had never viewed the land from such a height. Despite their perilous situation, she couldn't help but be stirred by the untamed beauty around them. The twins awoke hungry, their cries shattering the forest's tranquility. Seraphine nursed them awkwardly as the travois kept moving. Kyrian rode nearby to ensure they didn't fall. The girl's gentle demeanor was comforting, her serene voice calming as she taught Seraphine Lakota words for everyday items. "Moonwarden," she said, touching her chest. "Heart, Moonwarden." Seraphine repeated the unfamiliar words, awkward on her tongue. Kyrian smiled encouragingly. "Good. Now, Witching Chala." She pointed to the twins. "Witching Chala," Seraphine mimicked. "It means babies, boys," Kyrian clarified. "Girl is Witching Chala Wing." Seraphine felt strangely touched by this simple interaction, the deliberate sharing of language, of identity. She had been taught that Native Americans were savages, perilous hindrances to progress. Yet here she was, relying on their benevolence, learning their language, surrounded by people who had every reason to despise her, but had chosen empathy instead. "My people," she began hesitantly, unsure how to convey her thoughts. "They share tales about yours, unpleasant tales." Kyrian nodded, unperturbed. "We also have stories of white men who speak with forked tongues, who make promises in writing, then break them." She glanced at the twins. "But stories aren't always true for everyone. Your little ones will learn better ones." As dusk fell, they set up camp in a sheltered ravine where a small stream offered fresh water. No fires were lit, too dangerous with soldiers nearby. Instead, they consumed dried meat and berries, huddling together for warmth as the mountain air turned cold. Seraphine found herself positioned between a pony and Wee-Wee, the twins snugly nestled between them. The stars blazed vividly in the crisp mountain air, their number far greater than she had ever witnessed. "Precisely where are we headed?" she inquired of a pony as the camp prepared for the night. "To the summer hunting grounds," the elderly woman responded. "Close to the sacred waters where our people have congregated for countless generations, and the soldiers will struggle to locate us there." A pony's expression was somber. "They might, but it is more challenging to assault what remains unseen. The hunting grounds offer numerous concealment spots, caves where we can seek refuge if necessary." Seraphine pondered this. The relentless journey, the necessity of concealment, all to safeguard a lifestyle that appeared to be dissipating like early morning fog. "For how long can you continue this flight?" she asked gently. "Until we can no longer flee," a pony replied simply. "Or until there is no place left to escape to." That night, Seraphine's dreams took her to her father's farm in Pennsylvania, to the verdant rolling hills, the robust barn with its loft where she used to retreat with her books, the apple orchard that burst into white blossoms each spring. In her dream, she strolled along the familiar trails with her twins, now grown into young boys with Jatan's straight black hair and her own blue eyes. They dashed ahead of her, laughing, belonging to the land in a way she never quite had. She awoke with tears streaking her cheeks, a profound ache in her chest that had nothing to do with her physical injuries. The second day of their journey presented steeper ascents and denser forest. The twins were more irritable, perhaps picking up on their mother's unease or simply reacting to the unfamiliar surroundings. Seraphine hummed soft lullabies from her childhood, earning puzzled looks from the Sioux children who rode nearby. Around midday, one of the warrior scouts returned with news that had the leaders of their group huddled in urgent discussion. Seraphine couldn't comprehend the swift Lakota, but the tension was palpable. "White men," Huey translated for her in a low voice. Not soldiers, but 3 riders trailing us. A chill ran through Seraphine's veins. Renardson men, she thought. We don't know for certain, but they are armed and pursuing us deliberately. Starweave's hand moved to the knife at her belt. We alter our course now. We must hasten our pace. Their speed increased. The horses strained over rugged terrain. They veered northwest, navigating paths so narrow and rocky that Seraphine feared the travois would topple over the edge. The twins picked up on the change, growing increasingly distressed until their cries reverberated off the canyon walls. "They must be quiet," a pony warned, her usual calm demeanor strained. "Sound travels far in these hills." Seraphine attempted everything, nursing, rocking, singing, but the twins, perhaps overly tired from the jarring journey, refused to calm down. Finally, a pony retrieved a small pouch from her medicine bag. "Just a tiny amount," she instructed, demonstrating how to moisten her finger, dip it in the powder, and let each baby suck it briefly. "It will not harm them, only induce sleep." Seraphine paused, torn between her maternal instincts and the urgency of their predicament. But the faint sound of hoofbeats resonating through the canyon made the decision for her. She gave the boys the medicine as instructed, and within moments, both were in a deep sleep. They pressed on through the afternoon, navigating increasingly treacherous paths that no ordinary traveler would dare attempt. By nightfall, they had reached a high plateau surrounded by pine trees, offering some shelter from prying eyes while providing a clear view in every direction. "We'll rest here," one of the ponies declared. "The horses need water and rest before we can go any further." The camp was set up with little fuss. No tents were pitched, just blankets spread beneath the trees. The twins lay unnaturally still, prompting Seraphine to check their breathing repeatedly until a pony reassured her that the medicine was wearing off naturally. As darkness fell, 2 of their warrior escorts took positions at either end of the plateau, keeping watch for any pursuers. Seraphine found herself wide awake despite her fatigue, the knowledge that men were hunting them, hunting her children, keeping her alert to every sound in the night. Wee-wee settled beside her, wrapped in a blanket against the mountain chill. "You should try to sleep," she advised. "The little ones will wake up hungry soon." "I can't," Seraphine confessed, "not knowing they're out there." Wee-wee nodded in understanding. "Men like that exist in every tribe, men who hunt women and children." She stared into the darkness. "My husband was such a man." Seraphine looked at her in surprise. Wee-wee had never mentioned a husband before. "He was a warrior, respected for his bravery in battle." Wee-wee continued, her voice detached as if recounting someone else's tale. "But in our lodge, he was cruel. His hands left marks no one saw." She touched her side where old wounds might be hidden. "When I lost our child, he said I was cursed. He took another wife, a girl barely old enough to menstruate." "I'm sorry," Seraphine said softly. Wee-wee's smile was bitter. "I was fortunate. Many women are not. My father took me back against custom, brought me home." She glanced at Seraphine. "That is why I understand your fear. Some men see women and children as possessions to be claimed, not people to be cherished." The similarities between their experiences, despite coming from such different worlds, struck Seraphine deeply. "What happened to him?" Seraphine asked. "Your husband?" "He died raiding a crow camp 2 winters ago," Wee-wee replied, her tone holding no grief, no satisfaction, just a simple acknowledgement of fact. I mourned as custom required, but in my heart, she trailed off. In your heart, you are free, Seraphine finished for her. Wee nodded. As you will be, if we can keep you from these men who hunt you. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft signal from one of the watchmen. Everyone froze, listening intently. Seraphine strained her ears, but heard nothing beyond the whisper of wind through the pine needles. The faint, yet unmistakable whinny of a horse echoed from somewhere below them on the mountain trail. Wee, already reaching for her knife, whispered, "Let's go." A pony emerged from the shadows, her movements surprisingly stealthy for her age. "Wake the others," she directed Wee. "We need to move, and quietly." Seraphine, startled, asked, "In the dark?" The mountain paths were perilous enough in broad daylight. "We have no other option," a pony replied, beginning to gather her medicines. "There's a cave system about half a day's journey from here. We can take refuge there until the warriors find us." The camp swiftly transformed into a hive of silent activity. Belongings were hastily gathered, horses prepared, and the twins, roused from their induced slumber, began to fuss. Seraphine attempted to nurse them quickly, conscious that each passing moment heightened the risk of discovery. One of the scouts returned, relaying his report in hushed Lakota. Seraphine picked up the repeated word, "White men," and something about their whereabouts. "They've made camp below, Wee," she translated. 3 men, as we suspected. They plan to resume tracking at first light. Then we have a few hours' advantage, a pony stated. We must make the most of it. They departed under a moonless sky, guided only by the starlight and the generations-old knowledge of the mountains. Seraphine clung to the travois, the twins securely fastened against her, every muscle taut with the fear of a misstep that could send them tumbling off the narrow path. The horses navigated the darkness with an uncanny confidence, their instincts more dependable than human sight. They ascended steadily for what felt like hours until the air thinned, and Seraphine found herself breathing harder, her lungs aching with the exertion. Just before dawn, they reached a natural vantage point. In the dim, pre-dawn light, Seraphine could see the vast terrain they had covered. Mountains stretched into the distance like frozen waves, valleys filled with morning mist, and far below, barely discernible, the glow of a campfire where their pursuers rested, oblivious to their quarry's escape. "They'll lose our trail soon," a pony declared, her voice laced with satisfaction. "These high paths are known only to our people." As the sun rose, casting a golden hue over the landscape, Seraphine felt a peculiar blend of terror and exhilaration. A week prior, she had been resigned to dying alone in the desert. Now, she was fleeing through mountains with people who had become unlikely allies, her newborn sons alive and safe against her heart. She had no clue what awaited them at the sacred waters or what future could be forged from the remnants of her old life. Yet as she watched the sunrise over this untamed, beautiful land, Seraphine sensed something unexpected stirring within her. Not just the will to survive, but the first delicate sprouts of hope. "We press on," a pony declared, already guiding her horse toward the path ahead. The sacred waters lay ahead, and beyond them whatever fate the Creator had in store for us. Seraphine tended to the twins, now awake and remarkably composed in the chilly mountain atmosphere. "Whatever lies ahead," she murmured to them. "We will confront it side by side." The modest caravan pressed onward to the north, vanishing into the forest, like phantoms retreating from the dawn. Far behind them, down below, 3 pursuers scoured increasingly frigid paths, oblivious to the fact that their targets had evaded them, finding refuge in the ancient mountain sanctuary. They arrived at the sacred waters. On the fourth day, they entered a secluded valley nestled between towering peaks, where hot springs emerged from the earth's depths, releasing plumes of steam into the crisp mountain air. Ancient pines encircled the springs, their colossal trunks bearing witness to centuries of silent vigil. Moss-covered stones bordered the pools, their surfaces smoothed by generations of touch. Seraphine had never beheld such a sight. Steam ascended in spectral wisps, casting an ethereal mist that gentled the rugged mountain terrain. The air carried a scent of minerals and pine, a potent blend that felt purifying just to inhale. Their arrival was greeted with relief by those who had preceded them to the valley, several families who had chosen alternate paths to evade detection. Children emerged from shelters draped in hides. Women paused from their tasks. Elderly men who had been conferring together halted their discussion. All eyes turned to the newcomers, focusing on Seraphine and her twins with unabashed curiosity and a mix of welcoming sentiments. "They are curious if you have brought trouble in your wake," a pony remarked as they dismounted near the largest spring. "It is a valid concern." Seraphine's legs quivered as she stood for the first time in days. Her muscles weakened from inactivity and her recent childbirth. Kia offered a stabilizing arm, while Wee took charge of the twins, managing them with skilled gentleness despite her own past losses. "Have we?" Seraphine inquired softly. "Brought trouble?" "No," a pony asserted with conviction. "The men pursuing you lost your trail where the rocks leave no traces. Even if they regain it, they would be days behind us now." One of the elder men approached, his face etched with deep lines, years inscribed into his copper skin like the rings of an ancient tree. His hair, braided with strips of red cloth, hung white against his buckskin shirt. He carried himself with the authority of one who had earned respect through wisdom, rather than seized it through force. "This is Chief Running Bear," a pony introduced him. "My brother, he speaks some English." The chief's dark eyes scrutinized Seraphine intently, neither hostile nor particularly warm. "A pony says you were left to perish," he stated finally, his English hesitant but comprehensible. "Yes," Seraphine affirmed, holding his gaze steadily. "My husband's father deserted me in the desert because I bore twins instead of a single heir." Running Bear nodded slowly. "The ways of white men are strange to us. Children are a gift, not a burden." I looked at the twins, who were quietly fussing in Wee-wee's embrace. Boys, indeed. Their names were Hearthglen and Corvus. The chief's expression shifted subtly. While they were with us, they would need Lakota names, names that held power. I understood that this was not a suggestion, yet it was conveyed with kindness. It was simply a statement of fact, acknowledging that my sons now inhabited a world where Hearthglen and Corvus held no significance, no protection. I replied that I would be honored, and I genuinely meant it. Swiftstride Stonebear seemed pleased with my response. He addressed a pony in Lakota, engaging in a lengthy conversation that I couldn't follow, though I caught mentions of my name and Chotten several times. My brother conveyed, "You may stay until you are strong enough to choose your own path." A pony translated, "He has questions, but they can be addressed once you have rested." I was guided to a small lodge, separate from the others, near one of the smaller springs. Inside, furs and blankets were arranged to create a cozy sleeping area, and a small fire pit in the center provided warmth against the mountain's chill. "The spring water possesses healing properties," Carrion Grindstone explained, assisting me as I settled onto the furs. Later, when you are rested, we will take you there. Alone with my sons, I finally allowed myself to fully grasp our situation. We had evaded immediate peril, but what future lay ahead for us here, among people whose very way of life was under threat? How long before soldiers or settlers encroached upon this remote sanctuary? And what of my pursuers? Would Aurelian Renardson truly abandon the search for his grandchildren, his last link to his deceased son? The twins nursed and slept, unaware of their mother's worries. I admired their resilience, their ability to flourish despite everything. Hearthglen, the larger of the two, had developed a serious expression that reminded me of Gareth in his quieter moments. James remained more delicate, but his grip had grown stronger, tiny fingers clutching me with surprising force. "Your father would have loved you both so much," I whispered to them as they slept. Despite my worries, I managed to doze fitfully, awakened by every unfamiliar sound. The calls of the mountains, the distant laughter of children, the soft footsteps of women moving about the camp. When Kyrian returned with food, a rich stew of dried meat and wild roots, the sun was already low in the sky, casting long shadows across the valley. "You should eat. Then we will go to the spring," the girl said. "A pony says it will aid in your healing." The idea of immersing my still tender body in hot water made me pause, but the allure of being truly clean for the first time in days was too enticing to resist. After eating, I followed Carrion to a small, secluded pool, slightly removed from the main springs. "This is the women's pool," Carrion explained. The steam from the water's surface rose in wisps, reflecting an unusual shimmer. Seraphine could detect the scent of minerals, sulfur, and an earthy, primal aroma. Kyrian began to undress, instructing, "All garments must be removed. The water needs to touch every part of you." Seraphine paused only for a moment before shedding her clothes. Her body felt unfamiliar, her stomach still rounded from pregnancy, her breasts full of milk, and the tender areas between her legs still sore from childbirth. However, Kyrian regarded her with no surprise, accepting her condition as natural for a new mother. The water enveloped Seraphine like a warm hug, initially too hot, but then incredibly soothing. She inhaled sharply as the mineral-rich spring seeped into muscles she hadn't known were tense. Kyrian demonstrated how to scoop the water and let it cascade over her shoulders, her breasts, and the healing tissues that had been injured during childbirth. "This place is sacred to your people," Seraphine remarked, observing the respectful way Kyrian approached the springs. The girl nodded. "Many generations have come here. The waters heal the body and purify the spirit." She gently touched the pool's surface, creating ripples that captured the fading sunlight. "We believe the breath of the creators warms the water from beneath, a reminder of life hidden beneath all things." Seraphine closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink deeper into the spring. The heat reached her very core, carrying away days of fear and anguish. For the first time since Gareth's passing, she felt a sense of tranquility. "The twins," she said abruptly, opening her eyes. "Who is watching them?" "Watch is keeping an eye on them," Carrion assured her. "She knows how to care for the little ones." They remained in the spring until the light began to dim, then dressed in fresh clothes. Kyrian had brought a simple deer-hide dress for Seraphine, soft and pliable against her skin. Her hair, washed with a special clay mixture from the springs, hung loose down her back, already drying in the cool evening breeze. As they walked back to the lodge, Seraphine noticed a disturbance at the camp's perimeter. People were gathering, voices raised. Her heart quickened with anticipation. Could it be? Kyrian Grindstone confirmed, her face breaking into a smile. The warriors have returned. They hurried toward the gathering. Through the crowd, Seraphine caught glimpses of mounted men, their faces painted for battle, feathers and adornments decorating their horses. At their center rode Drakenvale, his expression solemn despite the apparent success of their mission. When he saw Seraphine, something flickered across his features. Perhaps it was relief or satisfaction at finding her and the twins safe. He dismounted in one smooth motion and navigated through the welcoming crowd. "You made it," he said simply when he reached her. "Thanks to a pony and the others," Seraphine replied. "What about the soldiers?" A faint smile touched his lips. About 50 miles to the east, they were encamped, weary and disoriented, convinced that we had escaped towards the buffalo grounds. Swift-stride Stonebear arrived, and Drakenvale focused on the chief, who was speaking swiftly in Lakota. Whatever the news was, it stirred whispers among the gathered crowd. "What's happening?" Seraphine inquired of Kyrian. "The soldiers have papers, a new treaty," the girl translated, her face clouded with concern. "It states that this land now belongs to white settlers. We must relocate to a reservation by the next full moon." Seraphine felt a heavy, cold sensation in her gut. Even in this secluded haven, the unyielding advance of her people posed a threat to the lifestyle that had rescued her and her children. "What are your plans?" she asked. Kyrian shrugged, a motion that reflected both acceptance and resolve. "We'll do what we always do. Find a new place, adapt, and endure." That evening, the camp assembled around a central fire for a council. Seraphine sat at the periphery with the twins, feeling both included in and detached from the discussions. The conversation was entirely in Lakota, but she didn't need to comprehend the words to grasp the emotions on the faces around her. Anger, defiance, fear, and determination were all evident. Silvershade spoke at length, his voice bearing the weight of his experiences. Whatever he proposed sparked intense debate, with some warriors nodding in agreement while others shook their heads vigorously. Running Bear listened to all sides, his weathered face betraying none of his own thoughts. Later, as the council dispersed into smaller groups, Drakenvale found Seraphine outside her lodge, the twins asleep in their makeshift cradle. "You seem better," he noted, taking a seat beside her on a fallen log. "The springs have been beneficial," she agreed. Kyrian mentioned they are sacred. "They are," he confirmed, gazing towards the mist rising from the hot pools. "My people have journeyed here for countless generations, long before horses, before firearms, before white men crossed the vast ocean." "And now?" Seraphine asked softly. His expression darkened. "Now they claim this land belongs to others, that markings on paper hold more significance than centuries of history." He picked up a stick and began to draw aimless patterns in the dirt. "The council is divided. Some advocate for resistance, while others believe we cannot prevail against so many guns. What are your thoughts?" Silvershade paused for a long moment. "I believe there are different forms of victory," he replied eventually. "Sometimes mere survival is enough of a triumph." Seraphine reflected on her own journey, the betrayal, the birth, and the harrowing escape through the desert. "I understand that now," she said softly. He glanced at the sleeping twins. "The naming ceremony will take place tomorrow. A pony has seen their spirits in her dreams." "Will they be accepted here?" Seraphine asked, voicing the fear that had lingered beneath all others. "They are children," Drakenvale said simply. In our tradition, they belong to the mother's people until they are old enough to choose their own path. He met her gaze directly. The dilemma was clear. What path would Seraphine Renardson choose? Would she remain with the people who had saved her? Or would she seek out her own kind once she was able? This was a question she had been evading since her rescue. The idea of reintegrating into white society presented its own set of risks. As a widow with twin infants and no means of support, her options would be severely limited and unappealing. She might secure work as a seamstress or cook in some remote frontier town, but the stigma of her circumstances would haunt her, and the shadow of Aurelian Renardson would always be present. Choosing to stay meant adopting a completely unfamiliar way of life, one that was under constant threat of vanishing. It meant raising her sons in a limbo, belonging neither here nor there. "I haven't decided yet," Seraphine confessed, "but I am thankful to have the choice." Drakenvale acknowledged her candor with a nod. "Rest now. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." The sun rose, casting a golden glow over the mountain peaks that gradually filled the valley with light. Seraphine awoke to find the camp bustling with activity, clearly preparing for a significant ceremony. Wee entered her lodge carrying new buckskin clothing for the twins and a beaded dress for Seraphine. "For the naming ceremony," Wee explained, "you must look the part." The dress was stunning, a soft, tanned deerskin adorned with intricate beadwork in geometric patterns of blue and white. It was evident that the dress had been made for someone else, someone shorter and wider than Seraphine. But Brightweave skillfully altered it with sinew thread, her agile fingers working swiftly. "Whose dress was this?" Seraphine asked as Brightweave arranged her hair, weaving in strands of sweet grass and small blue beads. "My sister's," Brightweave replied. "She now walks in the spirit world. She would be honored to see it worn for new life." The ceremony was held near the largest of the springs, where the entire band had gathered in a circle. The twins, bathed in the mineral waters and dressed in tiny buckskin shirts, were unusually quiet, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Aeoni took Hearthglen first, lifting him toward the morning sun. She spoke in Lakota, her voice strong despite her age, invoking spirits and ancestors that Seraphine could not see but whose presence seemed to fill the sacred space. "One Gleska," Aeoni pronounced finally. "Spotted eagle. One who sees far, who rises above the storm." The gathered people repeated the name, embracing it into their collective memory. Corvus was next, his smaller frame nearly disappearing in Aeoni's weathered hands. Again she spoke to the spirits, but this time her words were different, softer, more reflective. "Gloomwillow Brightlatch," she named him. "Rising star, one who brings light in darkness, who guides the way home." As the names settled over her sons, Seraphine felt tears well up in her eyes. These were not mere sounds, not just labels to distinguish one child from another. They were visions, prayers, hopes for who these boys might become. Running Bear stepped forward, using red ochre to mark each child's forehead. "They are now known to us," he declared in English, ensuring Seraphine could understand. "Our people will safeguard them as if they were our own." The ritual gave way to a feast, marking the first genuine celebration since their arrival at the sacred waters. Despite the uncertain future and the treaty that loomed over them, threatening yet another displacement, the people chose to revel in this moment of joy, this testament to life enduring against all odds. Seraphine found herself seated between a pony and Wee. Observing as the twins were passed, from one person to another, each member of the band admiring and blessing them. Drakenvale kept a slight distance, more of an observer than a participant. Yet Seraphine noticed him watching the children, with an expression that hinted at tenderness. As the festivities around the fire continued, he approached her. "These names are fitting," he remarked. "Strong names for the trials that lie ahead." "What trials?" Seraphine inquired. "Have you decided what the band will do about the treaty?" Drakenvale's gaze drifted to the encircling mountains, their peaks steadfast against the shifting sky. "We will venture further north," he said, "beyond the lands the white government claims. There are relatives there who will receive us warmly." "When?" "In 3 days. Enough time for you to regain your strength." He examined her face closely. "You are welcome to join us, you and the children, or I can escort you to the nearest settlement if that is your preference." Seraphine's eyes followed his to the mountains, then returned to the fire, where her sons were being held by Kyrian, their new names already replacing the ones she had given them in the desert. In just over a week, her world had crumbled and been rebuilt in a form she could never have envisioned. "I need time to consider," she replied after a pause. Drakenvale nodded, his eyes reflecting respect. "Some choices cannot be hurried." He briefly touched her shoulder before stepping away, the contact so gentle it might have been a figment of her imagination. That night, as the camp drifted into slumber, Seraphine sat outside her lodge, the twins nestled against her. Above, stars filled the sky, their brilliance unmarred by the clear mountain air. She reflected on Gareth, on the life they had planned together, now forever out of reach. She thought of the Reynardson Ranch, of Aurelian's cold pragmatism, and the men who had pursued her through the desert and mountains. Then she considered a pony's wisdom, Kyrian's gentle teachings, Windward's fierce guardianship, and Drakenvale's quiet resolve. She recalled the naming ceremony, the way these people had accepted her sons, despite having every reason to turn them away. The path forward was uncertain, fraught with peril, regardless of the direction she chose. But as she gazed up at the star-studded sky, cradling the newly named W-Lie Gleska and Gloomwillow Brightlatch, Seraphine Reynardson found that for the first time since Gareth's passing, she was not afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Whatever lay ahead, whether they ventured north with the band or returned to the realm of settlements and stagecoaches, they would confront it united, bearing the resilience they had discovered in the most unexpected of refuges. A secluded valley of sacred waters where ancient knowledge still surfaced from the earth's core, providing solace to those perceptive enough to accept it. The choice presented itself to Seraphine not in a sudden epiphany, but through a sequence of subtle insights. It commenced the day after the naming ritual, as she witnessed Kyrian instructing a group of children in the art of weaving reeds into miniature baskets. The girl's composure, the children's keen focus, the pure elegance of wisdom being transmitted from one era to the next. It dawned on Seraphine that this kind of enduring connection was scarce in the ever-moving, ever-advancing world of white settlements. Later on, she saw 2 elderly women preparing a deer hide, their calloused hands moving in flawless harmony, humming softly as they scraped and stretched the skin. Upon noticing her, they invited her over, demonstrating their method with gentle adjustments and encouraging gestures. Words were unnecessary. The task itself was the language they shared. By nightfall, Seraphine found herself seated with Wee-Wee near one of the smaller springs, learning to bead a pair of tiny moccasins for the twins. Her stitches were awkward compared to Wee-Wee's meticulous patterns, but the elder woman merely guided her fingers without criticism or frustration. "In your society," Seraphine inquired as they worked, "what becomes of women without husbands, without family?" Wee-Wee pondered the question, her needle never halting. "They are part of the band," she replied simply. "Everyone contributes what they can, cooking, tanning hides, gathering medicines, caring for children. No one goes without if others have plenty. And children without fathers, they have many fathers, uncles, grandfathers, mothers, cousins. You worry for your sons." Seraphine nodded. "In my world, they would be pitied. Orphans, half-orphans. It's a harsh existence here. They would be cherished, beloved, and embraced. Sons of a strong mother. Nephews of the people." Wee-Wee secured a thread. A different path, not easy, but never alone. That night, as Seraphine nursed the twins in her lodge, a pony joined, her bringing a tea brewed from herbs collected near the springs. The elder woman settled beside the small fire, her gaze distant as if perceiving beyond the hide walls enclosing them. "You have been contemplating," she remarked, "your journey ahead." "Yes," Seraphine confessed. "So many uncertainties, so few definitive answers." The elder woman's smile was tender. "That is the nature of all significant decisions. If the way were obvious, there would be no need to choose. In your visions," Seraphine began cautiously, "when you saw my son's spirits, did you glimpse anything of their future?" The elderly woman paused for a long time, her fingers dancing in the air as if deciphering unseen symbols. "I envisioned 2 eagles soaring above a vast river," she revealed at last. "One headed towards the sunrise, the other towards the sunset, yet their journeys intersected frequently. What does it signify that they will tread separate paths but stay entwined?" The pony's dark gaze met Seraphine's, conveying that regardless of her current decisions, her sons would ultimately forge their own destinies. Seraphine gazed down at her boys, witnessing their daily growth and transformation. Hearthglen Oneka returned her look with eyes that held a wisdom beyond his years. Corvus Gloomwillow Moonwarden slumbered peacefully, one small hand resting gently on his brother's arm. "And what about Drakenvale?" Seraphine inquired, the words escaping before she could hold them back. "What are his genuine thoughts about our being here?" A flicker crossed the pony's lined face, hinting at surprise or the acknowledgement of a long-held belief. "My grandson navigates a challenging journey," the pony responded cautiously. "Since the loss of his wife, he has guarded his heart, concentrating solely on safeguarding his people and upholding the ancient traditions. He has been hospitable towards us." "Indeed," the pony observed Seraphine thoughtfully. "That might be why some of the younger warriors murmur. They notice him evolving, taking interest in more than just hunting and war councils." "I wouldn't want to bring trouble upon him," Seraphine thought, a new concern taking root. "If my being here causes complications," the pony intervened, raising a hand to halt her. "Trouble finds us whether we welcome it or not. The true question is not whether storms will arise, but how we endure them." She stood, gathering her medicinal pouch. "Rest now. The morning will bring its own insights." The following day broke gray and chilly, with clouds amassing over the mountains in tight spirals that foretold rain. The camp buzzed with increased activity as people readied for their impending northern journey, inspecting travois bindings, sorting belongings to decide what to carry and what to leave, and curing meat for the trail. Seraphine found herself assisting almost instinctively, her hands working in tandem with others in the communal tasks. When one of the twins fussed, his grandmother simply lifted him from the cradle board and calmed him, while Seraphine continued filling parfleche bags with dried berries. When Brightlatch needed care, a spot was made for her near the fire, where she could sit comfortably, shielded from the growing wind. Midday brought the first sporadic raindrops, plump and cold against the skin. People relocated their work indoors or under makeshift shelters of pine branches. Seraphine was helping Kyrian secure a pile of hides when she spotted unusual commotion at the camp's southern boundary, warriors congregating with weapons at the ready. "What's occurring?" she asked. But Kyrian was already heading towards the disturbance, her youthful face etched with worry. Seraphine followed, leaving the twins safe with Stormtide in a nearby lodge. As she drew nearer, she noticed Silvershade astride his war pony, swiftly directing a group of warriors. Meanwhile, others were guiding women and children towards the caves, scattered along the valley's northern ridge. "Riders approaching," a young man informed Kyrian in Lakota. The urgency in his tone was clear, and Seraphine felt a chill of foreboding creep through her. "Soldiers." Kyrian shook her head after hearing more hurried details. "Not soldiers. 3 men. The same ones from before. The Reynardson men. They had found their trail after all." Silvershade noticed Seraphine and rode over, his expression serious. "You should be with the children in the caves," he stated bluntly. "Are you sure it's them?" she asked. "The men who were tracking us?" "Yes. Our scouts recognized the horses." His gaze met hers steadily. "They are well armed and moving swiftly. They must have picked up our trail where it crosses the eastern ridge." Seraphine's thoughts raced. These men had pursued her across deserts and mountains, relentless where others would have given up. Whatever reward or punishment Aurelian Reynardson had offered them must be substantial. "Let me talk to them," she said abruptly. Silvershade's brow furrowed. "Why would you confront men who mean you harm? Because they are here for me, for the twins. Their dispute is not with your people." She looked around the camp, at the women hurriedly moving children to safety, at the warriors preparing for a clash that could only end disastrously. Too much blood has been spilled over borders and belonging. I won't contribute to it. And if they attempt to take me by force, take the children. Seraphine lifted her chin. Then your warriors will intervene, and it will be the Reynardson men who instigated the fight, not me. Silvershade examined her face, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. After a moment, he nodded and turned to the warriors, issuing new commands in rapid Lakota. They reacted instantly, half taking up hidden positions around the clearing where the encounter would occur, the others retreating to form a protective barrier before the caves. "They will be concealed, but ready," Drakenvale explained, dismounting to stand beside her. "If the white men resort to violence, they will not leave this valley. And if they don't, then you speak your piece, and we see what transpires." He handed her his knife, a gesture that surprised her. "Keep this concealed in your dress. Use it if necessary." The weight of the blade in her hand was both comforting and frightening. Seraphine tucked it into a fold of her dress, hoping fervently she would not have to use it. The rain began to fall more steadily as they waited in the clearing, creating a silvery veil that reduced visibility and dampened sounds. Seraphine draped a blanket over her head for cover, suddenly aware of her appearance. The Lakota dress, the beaded moccasins, her hair braided in the tribal style. Would they even acknowledge her as the woman they had left to perish in the desert? The answer was forthcoming. 3 horsemen materialized from the fog, cautiously entering the clearing. They were travel-weary and caked with mud, but their rifles were polished and at the ready. Seraphine instantly identified the rider in the lead. Eldershade, Aurelian Renardson's foreman, the man who had left her with a broken wagon. Behind her, Chatton remained still, a silent, menacing presence. Out of view, she knew a dozen warriors were poised, awaiting any sign of danger. Eldershade reined in his horse, his eyes widening as he recognized her. "Mrs. Renardson," he called out, his voice feigning warmth that didn't reach his wary eyes. "Thank the Lord we found you alive." "No thanks to you," Seraphine retorted calmly. "You left me to die." The foreman had the decency to look uneasy. "There's been a misunderstanding, ma'am. We were separated in that dust storm. Couldn't find you anywhere." "We've been searching for weeks." The lie was so obvious that Seraphine nearly laughed. "It's strange how you searched in exactly the wrong direction until now." Eldershade dismounted slowly, handing his reins to one of his companions. He approached with exaggerated care, his eyes flicking from Drakenvale to Seraphine. "Your father-in-law is sick with worry. Your mother sent us to bring you and the little ones home safely. Your father-in-law ordered us to abandon you in the desert," Seraphine corrected him. "But he wants my sons, doesn't he? The Reynardson heirs." Eldershade dropped the act, his expression turning stern. "Those boys belong at the ranch with their family. Mr. Reynardson has rights." "They belong with their mother," Drakenvale spoke up, his deep voice carrying a quiet authority. Eldershade glanced at him dismissively. "This ain't your business, Indian." "The woman and children are under our protection," Drakenvale replied, unruffled. "That makes it our business." The foreman's hand drifted toward his holstered pistol. Instantly, the atmosphere in the clearing shifted. A dozen warriors emerged from hiding, bows drawn, rifles aimed. Eldershade froze, suddenly aware of how outnumbered they were. "Tell Aurelian Renardson that his grandchildren are safe and well cared for," Seraphine said into the tense silence. "Tell him that if he truly wants what's best for them, he'll let them grow up in peace." "He won't accept that," Eldershade warned, though his bravado had faded. "He'll bring the cavalry next time." "The cavalry is already hunting for other reasons," Drakenvale said with grim humor. "They have not found us yet." Rain streamed down Seraphine's face, cold rivulets that mirrored the ice in her veins. This moment, this confrontation, made everything clear. There could be no return to her old world, no compromise with the man who had tried to kill her for his own gain. "Go back, Eldershade," she said softly. "Convey to him that I perished in the desert, just as he planned. Inform him that the children met their end with me. Allow him to grieve for what he discarded. And if you don't," the foreman dared, despite the quiver in his voice revealing his apprehension. Seraphine grasped Drakenvale's knife, the blade reflecting the muted light even amidst the downpour. "Then you won't be leaving this valley to share any news with him." For an extended moment, no one stirred. The sole sounds were the soft tapping of rain and the far-off growl of thunder echoing through the mountains. Then Eldershade retreated, his hands raised slightly. "You've transformed, Mrs. Renardson," he remarked, a hint of reluctant admiration in his voice. "Once, you wouldn't have dared to confront a mouse." "Becoming a mother alters a woman," Seraphine responded. "So does deceit." Eldershade ascended his horse with measured movements, signaling his companions to retreat. "This isn't finished," he declared, but the threat lacked conviction. Indeed it is, Seraphine countered. They observed in silence as the three riders vanished back into the rain and fog. Only after they had vanished did the warriors lower their weapons, blending back into the camp with quiet precision. Seraphine remained still in the rain, the knife still gripped in her hand, her emotions surging too swiftly to identify. Drakenvale carefully took the blade from her quivering fingers. "You were courageous," he stated simply. "I was petrified," she corrected him. "But I couldn't permit them to endanger your people. Not after all you've done for us." A subtle change occurred in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a relaxation of the guard he maintained so meticulously. "Our people," he murmured, "if that is your wish." The rain started to abate. Blue patches emerged between the swiftly moving clouds. From the caves, people began to emerge. Children dashed out to play in the newly formed puddles. Women called them back with affectionate exasperation. Life resumed its rhythm, as adaptable as water finding its path around obstacles. Seraphine headed towards the lodge where she had left the twins, with Silvershade falling into step beside her. Inside, they found Windward humming softly to the boys, who were awake but content, their tiny hands waving in the air as if directing their own private orchestra. "They are unaware of any peril," we noted. "That is fortunate." Seraphine knelt beside the cradleboard, gently touching each son's cheek. "They will encounter enough dangers in their lives. Let them experience peace while they can." That evening, as the band gathered around the central fire for their final night before journeying north, Seraphine took her place not as an outsider, but as one of them. The twins were passed from arm to arm, admired and blessed by elders who declared them strong, destined for greatness. Running Bear approached her as the celebration drew to a close, his aged face grave in the firelight. "My sister mentioned that you confront the white men with bravery," he stated, his English deliberate yet comprehensible. "She said that you opted to shield the people, even when it put you in peril." Seraphine bowed her head in deference. "Your tribe sheltered us when we possessed nothing. How could I offer any less?" The chief inclined his head gradually. "A member of the tribe informed me that you have reached a conclusion." "I have?" Seraphine surveyed the gathering. She noticed Kamea instructing younger girls in a dance. She saw Starweave recounting tales to a cluster of children. She observed a tribe member organizing medicines near the fire. Lastly, she caught sight of Drakenvale, gazing at her from across the flames with a quiet fervor. "If you welcome us, we are prepared to journey north with the tribe." Swift-stride Stonebear, his weathered face etched with what might have been a smile. "The tribe has already embraced you and the children. The only uncertainty was whether you would embrace us." "Indeed, the journey won't be straightforward," Seraphine admitted. "There will be trials and perils." "Challenges exist on every path," the chief responded, his voice laden with the weight of his years. "But those endured alone are far heavier than those shared among many hands." As the fire dwindled and the camp prepared for the night, Seraphine sat outside her lodge, observing the stars as they began to appear in the clearing sky. The twins slept soundly inside, their new names wrapping around them like protective cloaks. Soft footsteps approached, and Drakenvale offered an additional blanket to ward off the post-rain chill. "Are you resolute in your decision?" he inquired, taking a seat beside her on a fallen log. "As resolute as one can be about anything in this world," she answered. "My sons will learn from both their fathers and their adopted people." They will carry both worlds within them. Drakenvale fell silent for a moment, lost in thought as he gazed at the stars above. "It will not be easy," he said at last. "There will be those among us who never fully accept them or you, and the white world will always view them as belonging nowhere entirely or everywhere at once." Seraphine envisioned seeing with eyes that comprehend both perspectives. She turned to face him directly. "And what of you, Drakenvale? Do you harbor doubts about my choice?" His expression, usually so reserved, opened to her like a night-blooming flower. "When I encountered you in the desert, I only intended to honor my wife's memory by saving what she could not be saved." He glanced toward the lodge where the twins slept. "I did not anticipate finding my own healing in yours." The sincerity of his words, the profound emotion behind them, touched Seraphine in a place she had believed forever sealed after Gareth's passing. Not a romantic love. It was too soon, too complex for that. But a bond. A possibility that someday hearts might heal enough to risk opening again. "We depart at dawn," Drakenvale announced, standing up. "The trek north will be arduous, especially with the children." "We will endure," Seraphine replied with newfound assurance. One day at a time, he nodded, understanding shining in his eyes. One day at a time, he concurred. That is how all significant journeys are undertaken. As he departed, Seraphine stayed under the night sky, sensing not the end of one journey, but the start of another. The next day they would head north, leaving behind the soldier's domain and Aurelian Renardson's influence, venturing towards an uncertain future, but one they would confront side by side. The holy waters had mended more than her physical wounds. They had cleansed her of fear, replacing it with a steadily growing resolve. Whatever lay ahead, be it years of tranquility or fresh obstacles, she and her sons would no longer face it in isolation. For a woman who had been left to perish in the harsh wilderness, there could be no greater triumph than this. If this story touched you, give it a like and tell us in the comments. What would you have done if you were in their shoes? Subscribe to Frontier Stories and join us as we continue to tell stories of hope, resilience, and the beautiful, messy truth of Wild West.